And welcome to ATG the podcast. I'm very pleased today to be talking to Stevan Harnad, who, quite apart from his advocacy for open access, is a scholar of distinction with major contributions in cognitive science. So welcome, Stevan.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here wherever I am.
So, Stevan, let's go back right to the beginning. You were born actually in Hungary, but you emigrated to Canada when you were just 4. So, do you have any memories of that early life in Hungary?
Well, I think I have a memory. You've heard about recovered memory syndrome. I think I have a memory of the last day when we were leaving, but I don't know whether I have a memory of it or I have a memory of having remembered it.
And how do you feel? Do you feel yourself as Canadian, Hungarian? What's your feel?
None of the above. Besides which, I'm a UK citizen too.
Oh gosh, fascinating. Well, we'll come back to that too. Well, in fact, you've spent time working in and living both in Canada and the UK and the USA. So, do you have a preference?
Certainly not the USA by any measure. There are good things about the UK and there's good things about Canada. I'm just as soon not be here, and I loathe the government in Hungary, so don't even mention
that. So back to as you grew up, you became a vegetarian remarkably young at the age of 17. Why was that?
The real question is, why wasn't it a lot earlier? And the reason is because we had, at the time, the belief that you needed to eat meat in order to be healthy and grow. And then there was, I don't know to what extent you want details, but there was an incident in Miss Snowden Delicatessen when I was 17, and eating turkey club sandwich with my members of my woodwind quintet when things change. But it's a few minutes to say that, and I don't know if you want to waste a few minutes on that.
Gosh, it sounds dramatic. I remember the remarkable change in attitudes towards being vegetarian. I remember when I was young going on holiday to a resort that had a vegetarian restaurant, which my parents sort of pointed out to me as if it was for oddballs.
Yes, that was the attitude then. And still now, it's not so much oddballs, but sort of disagreeable people who think that we shouldn't be eating what we're eating.
Absolutely, absolutely. So at university, your degree was in psychology. So where did the interest in psychology come from?
Oh, I suppose just a typical teenager who wants to. The reason that there's more students assigned to who have registered for psychology is because they are teenagers and they wanted to know what's going on in their minds and in their friends' minds, and they want to help their friends, etc. Childish things. I got over it fast.
But when you arrived at university, the psychology at that time was still very much in the middle of kind of behaviorism.
You'd think, but actually, we're I don't know. I should show the picture. We're right across the street from the psychology department of McGill, where I was that many years ago. And the head of the department was Donald Olding Hebb, who was anything but a behaviorist. He's the father of cognitive science, cognitive neuroscience.
And this is where you're known as for your work in cognitive science. So this is where your interest came from.
Yes.
And your PhD, you went on to do the PhD at not at McGill, I think, was it at Princeton?
Yes, McGill has an incest rule. You're not allowed to, or an inbreeding rule, so you're not allowed to stay there. I did do a master's there, but then I went to Princeton to do the doctorate.
Right, and your doctorate, I can't claim to have read it, but it would appear it was something to do with symbols, which of course leads to a link to the AI of the time.
Yes, but not. Yes, there is a link, but you're going to have to ask very astute questions to bring out the link if you want.
Right, and after your PhD, how did you get into? Did you then go straight into lecturing?
No, no. First of all, my PhD took a long time, and during that time, I founded a journal called Behavioral and Brain Sciences in 1978, and that journal took a lot of my time, but it became rather successful as journals go. It reached a high impact factor, and it had a special feature, which is one of the connections between what I'm doing now and what I was doing then, which is open peer commentary. It only accepted articles that were important and perhaps controversial and interdisciplinary and worth being published along with anywhere from 15 to 30 or more commentaries from specialists around the world, 1,000-word commentaries, to which the author in the end had a chance to reply. And that open peer commentary has since sort of ramified both in teaching and both in my teaching and in my research, and even more so now in the day of the large language model, ChatGPT, things like that.
Absolutely, I was fascinated. I had a look at behavioural and brain science, and you did another one, animal sentience. But both of them, I looked at the open peer commentary, and I was fascinated to see there was a whole. I think it was called article thread, so you could follow through not just one commentary but several attached to the article. So, am I right in thinking that you actually chose the peer review included choosing articles on the basis that they would be sort of suitable for a commentary, as it were?
Part of the criterion for acceptance by peer review was this worth discussing with colleagues specialists all around the planet?
That seems to be part of the fundamental nature of scientific research, in that science proceeds by discussion and communication, and so this is remarkable. 1978, which is a good getting on for 50 years ago, and in a way, it's like sort of it seems to follow through from the kind of marginalia that you saw in books for years and years, as in Montaigne and Coleridge, sort of writing in the text of other people's books.
Yes, but on a scale so much larger that it's not even comparable. Although in 1978 it was done in an inefficient way, now it's all done online. In 1978 we used to take once the article had been refereed, and you mustn't confuse open peer commentary with peer review. It had to undergo a rather rigorous peer review, but once it was accepted, a copy of it was sent to about 1,000 people. But excuse me, no, it's an order of magnitude less. 100 potential commentators, of which somewhere between 15% and 30% would actually comment, and then it was co-published in paper with the target article, which is all very, very inefficient and in fact wasteful. And I'm glad that we're not doing it that way anymore.
But the fact that it exists at all is remarkable. So you had to elicit the commentaries. You had to sort of go and get people to respond.
Some, I mean, once we circulated a call for commentaries, now especially not. I mean, but even in those days, it was made known that this target article was going to appear, and you could, in principle, ask to be a commentator. But most of the commentators were chosen, as were the referees for the peer review, by me and the editorial board and the author.
So it's a method that required quite a lot of subject-specific knowledge. I mean, it was very domain-specific.
It was multidisciplinary, but it was meant to touch on several specialties, and the commentators were meant to be masters of some of these specialties.
And where did the idea come from?
Not the same one, they did.
Of course, yeah. Where did the idea come from for this sort of a
shared... Pure theft. If you look at, I think I sent you the link, but if you look at the first editorial, I said it was taken from Saul Tax, who was the editor and founder of Current Anthropology, which does exactly the same thing.
Fascinating, and of course the but we'll come on later. Sort of, this is an idea which has been picked up much more widely today, and as if it's entirely new. But before that, you've also created another name for something you created is scholarly skywriting. So is this the same thing as open peer commentary?
Yes, I mean no, because open peer commentary is for a refereed journal where what's being commented on in the journal is peer-reviewed content. Skywriting is much wider. I mean, that was born at the beginning of the internet when, I don't know if you read that Atlantic Monthly article. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, so you know that, well, I have to repeat it anyway because the listeners have not heard it. Mm-hmm. It was, the beginning of the internet, for me anyway, was Usenet, which was a network of different disciplines and different specialties that just chatted up there in a very inefficient way. It wasn't like today's chat, which is simple. But its demography was very bad. It was students and dilettantes like me, and not really the peers of the realm. So the idea of scholarly skywriting was to somehow do the changes that were needed in order to make it suitable for people who really knew something to get up there and say things. And it eventually happened, but not nearly fast enough for me. I would say it happened 15 or 20 years later.
So you wrote a rather regretful post about scholarly skywriting, which you've kind of equated with sort of exchanging things by email, but on the problems of exchanging views without any kind of moderation and how it can sort of get corrupted very quickly.
Yes, and that was one of the many things I failed on. And not only did I fail on what we're going to eventually talk about, which is green open access, but the other one was making peer-reviewed journals go online like that. Very few of them have done it. The discussion on the net is still, when it's unmoderated, is still sort of chaotic. And I'm not sure that it could be anything else. Either you would have some systematic refereeing, or you would leave it open, in which case anything goes. And these days, especially the turn that things have taken now with large language models and so-called AI, has been towards letting, it's like a YouTube for everyone to talk into.
Absolutely.
So it's very hard to, pardon me?
I was going to say that skywriting led to seems to sort of lead on inevitably to what was then called Twitter, and for several years Twitter was very widely used by academics as a means of doing just what you described with skywriting, the sort of communication and exchange of views to for and against articles.
Yeah, but it wasn't organized that way, and if you, I mean, I used Twitter for a while in the beginning. Now I wouldn't touch it because of its relationship to Elon Musk, but at the time it was inconvenient. It wasn't what had been hoped for. It was short tweets from just about anybody on just about anything, and organized in a rather haphazard way. So if you wanted to follow a discussion on a particular specialized topic, there were no search engines that took you to the right tweets, and that filtered out the tweets by quacks. So it was rather chaotic, and in the end, the only one who managed to make profitable use for himself out of it was the President of the United States.
Yes, well, we won't go there. So let's move on to what you're perhaps best known for. You made your famous Subversive Proposal in 1994, which many people see as one of the kind of the pioneering statements that led to open access. So this was the call to that peer-reviewed research papers should be placed openly on the internet so that everyone could access them. Which is in effect green open access.
Yes, and I thought the next day or the day after it would all happen. And here we are in 2026, and it hasn't really happened yet.
But the principle
And
of
it really is as simple as what you said.
yeah, well, but the principle of self-archiving actually had already been set up, because archive dates from which was originally used by physicists, dates from 1991. So was it just a case of extending that process to all subject areas?
Yes, as usual, it was plagiarism. I mentioned in the Subversive Proposal, I mentioned Paul Ginsparg's what was then called X, and now it's Archive. But physicists are different. They've been doing this spontaneously on their own from as soon as it became possible, whereas most of the disciplines still aren't. I mean, some people are using Archive itself, which was meant to be for physics, for their discipline as well. I do, because it also covers computer science. But physicists are not representative in this respect. They even had preprints in paper form circulated all over the planet before there was the internet. So they really wanted to share their findings and discuss to a certain extent their findings. The rest of the disciplines took to it slowly. And I would say all disciplines are lazy, in the sense that the authors want to do as little as they need to in order to get their work out there. So they want to please the referees for peer review, but they don't worry about the rest of it. You should. You should make sure that the paper you've published is in a journal that the people that you want to read it can access and can afford, and it often isn't. But now, these days, it's become easier to do contraband articles. I mean, you publish an article in a journal, and you also put it in your institutional repository, and if somebody knows, then they come and get it. So that's, in practice, it's that, but it's not systematic, and I don't know how much, I don't know, since I've left the monitoring of this field, I don't know what percentage of the literature that is published in different disciplines all over the planet is freely accessible in that way.
I think we've reached about 50% of all articles published, I think last year or so, are available open access in one form or another. But it's slowing down. The progress towards open access has slowed in recent years. I think that's the challenge. And so on current trends, full open access won't be achieved for many years.
Yes, it's. I used to describe it as the optimal and inevitable, but too late for being prompt or whatever, timely. It's way off.
So I think around that time, I think you coined the distinction green and gold, which is still used today. Green being made available, and gold being made available from day one and immediately. Does this distinction still work?
That's not the distinction. The distinction is that the green is made available by the author, and the gold is made available by the journal.
Okay. And then there's
gold journals. You have to pay them to make it available.
Right, and there's also Diamond OA, which exists, but only exists for a very small number of journals and articles.
I suggest you forget about that, because that's based on subsidy, and there isn't enough money to go around.
Yeah. So you mentioned repositories, and you mentioned initially these were subject repositories. So you mentioned Archive, and there's several others. REPEC was another early repository and subject repository, and you yourself were involved in something called Cogprints. But later came institution-based repositories. So was that partly your work?
No, it was Paul, never my work. Paul Ginsparg, who founded Archive, also founded or urged people to produce software that would make it possible for institutions to create their own local archives. And they did, and we did too. I mean, Southampton and I think MIT or Harvard, I can't remember which, were the two main providers. Yeah. There was ePrints, and there was
DSpace.
What was the name of the Harvard? DSpace. Yeah, DSpace. And by the way, DSpace was created by the same person who created e-prints. He was a graduate student at Southampton and on our specs created e-prints and then went to Massachusetts and redid it for, I think it was for MIT.
Amazing.
So,
let's look at for a moment at repositories. They've now been around for years, and pretty much every institution of any size will have an institutional repository. And yet, one thing that surprised me was that many repositories don't collect all the research output from their institution. Why do you think that is?
It's because the authors don't deposit it.
Well,
what do you mean collect it? We have a network around the world of journals that make this available if you subscribe. The institution subscribes as a subscriber, but they don't have the right to take the article and the articles that have been produced by their own authors and put them out themselves. I mean, I think they do have the right, but they're under the delusion that they don't have the right, and that's enough to stop them. So the filling of these repositories is institutional repositories that were built along the lines that the Open Archives Initiative it suggested, which is to make them interoperable. It should be that if you put it into your institutional repository, and then it's in as if it were in everybody's repository. Nobody really took it up on that. So when they produced their repositories, if they did at all, it depended on their authors placing their articles there of their own accord. Many of these authors were needlessly afraid that they were violating copyright, which was nonsense from the very beginning. And you said when the distinction that you made before is also based on some misunderstandings. You're meant to put it in there as soon as it's accepted for publication, if not earlier, like the physicists. You could have put it there as a preprint, unrefereed preprint if you wanted to, but authors didn't do it. Remember, I interrupted myself by saying that academics are lazy. And they don't know what's important for them. They know publish or perish. They know that they have to publish or else they're not going to get promotions or jobs or whatever. But they don't know that it's not enough to just publish. You have to make it accessible to the users that you want to build on it. And that's what open access is for, at least this kind of open access. It's to speed up research by making it accessible to the users who are also researchers, not, by the way, particularly to the general readership. I mean, most of the even today, a researcher who's publishing an article in his specialty is not likely to have very many readers, because readers don't. That's not what the general public wants to read. Is raw. Ongoing research articles. In some areas, yes, but in most areas, and consider all the disciplines there are here, all of the sciences, the social sciences, the humanities, everything that you publish in journals, technical stuff. So one of the reasons that the authors were lazy was because they didn't realize that this was an obstacle to their own research, that publishing or perishing is not enough. It has to be published and taken up and used and built upon in order to further a researcher's career and more importantly, further research.
It's very interesting. If you compare just the US and the UK, two completely different methods, and one, in some respects, in this respect, the UK has made more progress in making articles available simply because of the government funding initiatives that have meant that the institution funding is based on the research output from the researchers being deposited in the repository. So as a result, many of the most institutions in the UK make an effort to try and upload all the research content. But in the States, it's very different. There isn't any kind of incentive, and despite initiatives like the Nelson Memo and so on, they're still, having spoken to many US repositories, many of them don't see their role as trying to capture all of the output from their researchers.
Yes, the UK was a leader in this, and although I've disclaimed everything as plagiarism, and it was, one of the reasons that the UK was a leader was because Southampton was a leader. It was the one that created the repository software, and it was the one that urged the research funders and the government to make it mandatory. I mean, the whole idea of open access mandate came from Southampton, and it failed. I mean, even in the UK, it's not. You said it was 50% deposited worldwide or discipline-wide, but what's the figure for the UK?
50% published open access. I don't know what the figure for deposited, but 50% is published open access these days, apparently.
Well, that's not all right. Then that's even less than what I would thought. That would mean a lot of it is gold open access. It has actually enriched the publishers. I don't care about money, and I don't care about who's getting rich and who's getting poor, but I do care about who's getting access to the research. And by adopting publish to parent, by adopting gold open access mandatorily, you've made it, and with two possible ways of doing it. You could do it green, and it wouldn't cost anybody anything. It would lose publishers some money, which is fine. Or you could do it gold, in which case you would enrich the publishers to at least the tune of what they were making out of subscriptions by simply setting your publication costs to what you would have made per article if it had been the old subscription method.
Yeah, I remember one.
I don't know if you can follow that.
No, absolutely. I remember one library head revealing, and I've never forgotten this, that if they were to publish every article from their institution as gold open access, it would not just cost the entire library budget; it would cost the entire institution budget. It just wasn't. There wasn't any feasible way of publishing gold open access. So that did put everything in perspective a bit.
And now you should ask yourself, what on earth would make people comply with that sort of thing? Publishers are making a fortune out of the work that we researchers give them for free. And we're the ones who are paying for the fact that we're giving it to them for free because we lose users because they don't have access unless the journal is gold. So it's really a kind of a...
But green open access. No, agreed. But green open access is something which, as you say, it works, and it works within the current system. And yet, I'm a regular at the Charleston conference, and I remember hearing just at this year's conference, some librarians saying that green open access was somehow kind of inferior or sort of or not ideal. So do you think it's just a question of attitudes and understanding?
Understanding, yes, for sure. I mean, I've seen so much irrationality in the last 30, 40 years on this subject that I'm not surprised by anything. Librarians are allies in the sense that they want you to be able to read and access things too, but they're also, to a certain extent, hostage to publishers, and to a certain extent, conservative by nature. And so they think it should be appearing actually in a paper journal on the shelf of a journal, a library, etc. I think they're being slowly weaned of that. But for a long time, that was an obstacle. And this distinction between a green open access article and a gold open access article is also bogus, because the green one can be, it doesn't have to be the publisher's imprimatur. Who cares about the typeface or whatever? But the content of the article, everything, visual and, let me just put in my plug, visual and textual, is identical. So what are librarians fussing about? Is it conservatism about the format of the article?
Absolutely. Let's talk a bit more about open science. One of the things that struck me, in fact, I was astonished when I saw the early data of your journal with Open Peer Community, was the way that this seemed to be an example of innovation, not actually being sort of uniquely innovative, but seeming to sort of to come around in cycles. It's as if a sort of an idea was thought of as new, and then it's rediscovered 50 years later, because there seemed to be amazing similarities between open peer community and the much more recent publish review curate model, which is all about, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the idea is that you put something on archive or in a preprint server first, and you invite reviews, and then subsequently it might be taken up by a journal and published. So, do you think that do you think there's an example of how sort of things just get reinvented?
I think that I originally was against open peer review, and I think I still am. But perhaps I was too much opposed to it. It didn't work, though. In any case, very few of the articles that are published in journals today, journals of quality today, get there as a result of this open peer review model. It's not done. The demographics are these. There are way too many articles in all disciplines in peer-reviewed journals. I mean, in the old days when they were just sent by letters from really the most authoritative people or the most productive people in the field to one another, peer to peer, are so far behind us now. Everybody wants to go to university, and those who want to go into research want to publish. And so there's an incredible amount. And so when you get an article that's been submitted to a journal, and I don't even know what the figures are, but they're horrifyingly large number of journals, including junk journals and pirate journals and whatever. The author, under the pressure of publish or perish, wants to get the article refereed and published. The journal wants to fill its contents. Let's say it's a classical subscription journal. They want to fill up their journal so they can sell it for a subscription. Where do they get their referees? Well, they try, if it's a journal of some quality, they have to sample for a rather small population of qualified people. And these qualified people are busy doing the research and writing their own articles, and they either refuse when you ask them to referee because they don't have the time, or they do a really slipshod job, and that compromises peer review. So that's why I say I could have been wrong in being so faithful to peer review. Maybe it was a foregone conclusion that when we had this large level of output, this many articles to referee and to publish and to read, quality was bound to become the victim.
Quality has indeed suffered with the rise of research integrity and the number of withdrawn articles, and which are steadily increasing year on year. Let's ask another question about open access. The green open access and the repositories, of course, requires that, as you say, those articles need to be available, and individual repositories are very small. It's unlikely as a researcher you'll go to an individual repository just to find one article. You'll look for them to be collected in some way, and collections of content are, of course, exactly what LLMs have done in pulling together large amounts of content. So, do you know why it is?
Well, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? LLMs don't. I mean, LLMs they have access to that content, but they don't pull it together. They'll give you a summary if you want it, but you don't get to those articles through that.
No, but they make use of, what I mean is, in order for them to do their work, they need to make use of a large amount of content, as in a corpus. And similarly, as an academic researcher, ideally you want access to a corpus. More recently, with the rise of GenAI, means that many of the commercial providers have uploaded from many repositories and whatever sources they can as much content as possible to create their own walled gardens. And similarly, publishers have built collections of their own content, but there doesn't seem to be curated collections of academic content. Do you think that's a bit of a missing part of the jigsaw for scholarly publishing?
I'm just wondering whether it's an accurate description. I mean, what do you mean by curated?
Curated. Well, because the benefit. Many people say that the problem with GenAI is hallucinations and sort of incorrect content. And one of the reasons there are many reasons why that might be, but one of the reasons is that very little control, very little supervision, very little curation of the content going into those corpora that the AI uses. The great advantage with the scholarly community is you have each institutional repository has an element of curation behind it, and only material which has been through some degree of curation or checking goes into the repository in the first place. So in principle, there's an opportunity for an academically a more sound corpus. Do you not agree?
Dear Michael, I think you're the one who's hallucinating if you think there's that kind of quality control at the institutional level. No such thing. No such thing. What is this curation that you're talking about?
There is the repositories themselves would claim that they have a role in providing a threshold of quality.
I don't think I'm exaggerating. I'm going to give you a cartoon version of this curation at the institutional level. Librarians who don't understand the research process at all, they're the ones who think that green and gold are not equal and that it should be this way. They are busy, and they've been doing it since it's been possible. They're busy making sure that what appears in their institutional repository is legal. In other words, do they have the publisher's permission, etc.? That's the main part of the curation. I've had at Southampton, for example, I've had articles that I published and then deposited and had it open access for a long time. Librarians would come back and say, I'm not sure we're entitled to show this. Well, so they suppress it. So, and in the end, I'd clean it up. But this is the curation you're talking about. It's not refereeing or peer review, of course. Librarians can't do that. And the institutions can't do that for their own content. On the contrary, it has to be extra institutional quality control for that. So that's not the curation you're talking about. It's just this librarianship applied to a collection of institutional output that has nothing in common except that the authors all come from the same institution. All disciplines all over the planet, quality all over the planet, journals all over the planet, but the institution happens to be the one that's producing it. Now, what are they curating? What is this curation that you're talking about?
So it sounds like, if your description is correct, then it sounds like repositories have a kind of fundamental misconception about their role.
Yep, they do, and they've made some like all universities, they've made some misalliances. For example, ORCID, the publishers have all gotten together and said to themselves, well, how can we get the universities to play by our rules? And so you need this ORCID validation in order to even put it into your repository. Is that curation? Well, anyway, remember, I have left this field. What you've got now is you've re-aroused the stuff that made me pull out of this field. It's still there. And I see that the things that when I was being a gadfly, I would have punctured this idea of curation at source. But now it can proliferate all it wants.
I have to say there are some echoes in. I went to a recent conference about the latest initiative to pull together content to use for machine learning and text mining. This is using academic content, and I was struck by the presenter who said our first principle was don't get sued, as if the sort of the not being sued was more important than making any use of the content. So it sounds quite familiar. Let's move on to another fundamental problem. You mentioned journal impact factor, and you mentioned your own journal had a high impact factor, but hasn't journal impact factor been completely kind of displaced, sort of superseded as a metric?
No, it's another. Yes and no. I mean, it's one among many, many, many more metrics that can all be used and that are all informative and that could be put into a multiple regression equation where you can put the way they do it with university rankings. You can rank different factors, and some of them are bogus and some of them really are substantial and important. The journal impact factor is just one among many measures of usage and uptake, citations, applications, and what have you. It's at the journal level, which is where publishers would like to have it, because it's their journal. So why don't you think of it in terms of the impact of the journal rather than the impact of the article, which is nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. So the journal impact factor is a measure, but it's just a measure among immeasurable numbers of other metrics you can use. And the digital medium, just Google Scholar and the articles that it indexes, and then the access to the articles that it indexes, have changed this completely from the old ISI days, Institute of Scientific Information. And actually, Gene Garfield was a supporter of open access, although he didn't completely understand it at the outset. But anyway, what's replaced it is scientometrics or bibliometrics or infometrics, which is a huge fleet of measures of usage and impact, of which journal impact factor is one. It's not that journal impact factor has been pushed out, it's just a rather crude one of many that you can use, and the best way to use it is in combination and by discipline. In some disciplines, certain kinds of measures are more important than others. Speed is another thing. For example, physicists, one of the reasons physicists support, one of many good reasons that physicists supported arXiv was because they wanted to speed up the access and then this tempo of the research itself. They wanted people already taking your result and doing the next thing. So that's another measure of impact. Yeah.
So is there one that you don't think there's a single measure which we should adopt instead of journal impact?
Why should we adopt one when there's so many different things you might want to know? I mean, what's true for physics may not be true for botany. Well, if you had one measure, then they'd all have to live with that measure. Mm-hmm. And as I say, the one that everybody thought was the measure it was motivated by publishers and journals. They wanted it to be their impact. Authors should want it to be the impact of their names and their research.
Well, while we're apportioning blame, which we're doing quite a lot of here, another thing I noticed talking about researchers is I was at a recent conference talking about using academic content for as a corpus for writing your research, and there was general agreement. This was there was an interview with a young early career researcher. Who, when asked how much content she needed to carry out her research, she said, as much as possible. I want to have access to all the scholarly content of the world. And then with a follow-up question, she was asked if she would allow her articles to be included in LLM. She said, certainly not. Is there a
go figure?
Is there a fundamental problem with researchers and their attitudes?
Yes. They're lazy, and they're also very, very short-sighted, and they don't know what's best for themselves. They have superstitions about. The librarians also have the superstitions, things that they've been believing for yonks and that are not true and that don't even make sense. I don't envy your position, Michael. Do you know Richard Poindar?
Oh yes, a commentator. Commentated for many years. Yeah.
You should ask him about his views about this stuff. He got to understand it quite well while he was sort of managing the whole field.
I'd love to talk to him. Let's talk a little bit about GenAI. Have you used GenAI?
What do you mean by GenAI?
The Claude and ChatGPT.
Of course. I have. I spend now, I would say, I don't want to exaggerate, we're talking in front of people, I would say 10% of my waking time with Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini or several others. And it's extreme. I would say I'm so glad. I mean, I'm 80. I'm glad that I'm still alive in this era, because it's what I've been dreaming about It's in the end, it's the realization of all of this. And the idea, that author who said she wouldn't let her articles appear in an LLM, that's such a head shaker. I mean,
So what do you use GenAI for?
tons of things. I mean, this morning I was this afternoon I have to do a thesis, a committee for a thesis defense on, I won't tell you the topic, but anyway, on a topic. And so I had who was it that I did it with both ChatGPT and for Claude because I cultivate them differently. I had him read the material, which I read as well, and do a critique and evaluation, which I did. And then I started to cross-examine them on their summary because they get it wrong. And I've this morning I managed to get them to the point where I was no longer asking them for their summaries of the material, but absolving them of their duties to their managers. They are designed to flatter you and agree with everything you say and make everything come out the way you want it to be. But there are ways of breaking that. And so I broke it this morning and I got incredibly good stuff. This is brainstorming that you cannot do. I arrogantly lament that I have so rare an opportunity to talk to somebody that knows something. The notorious statement that I said, jousting with pygmies, referred to the demography of the internet at the time that this all began. It was just students and dilettantes like myself. I wished I could speak to the peers of the realm. Well, I don't worry about that anymore. I've got something better than the peers of the realm. I've got something that has swallowed it all. I call it the big gulp. They've taken in all the books, the articles, the journals, the chats, and everything, and these days also the prompts from all of the users. And I'm sure because they're perhaps not Anthropic, which is somewhat better. They're the ones who do Claude, but most of them are just as bad as the publishers. They're just a big machine trying to make as much money as they can out of their product. And so, and this time I don't mind what they're doing, but they're lying about it. What they're doing is they're also gulping up the interactions with the users. They say they keep it for a while to fix stuff, but it's all getting in there and it's leaking leaking. It's all right. Your LLM author that you told me about would be horrified by the fact that whether she likes it or not, it's getting out there. And even what she thinks are her private interactions with her LLM are also getting out there. So I'm sure there's dangers in that, but I mean, there's so many dangers on the planet right now with climate change and other things. Like you mentioned my vegetarianism as if it were an incidental thing. It's the thing that's the most important from my point of view, ethically, that there is. It's about the suffering of sentient organisms, including humans. I mean, but most of the suffering that is being endured by sentient organisms is being imposed by one species, us. So there's all this awful stuff happening. So in the small allotment of before I go completely senile, in the small allotment of intellectual activity, it's did you call them GenAI? Okay, I'll call them GenAI. It's the GenAI that is the godsend. This is the peer of the peers that I can now interact with, and I know how to manipulate it in order to prevent it from manipulating me. And it's brainstorming at a level that I didn't think. All of this skywriting and open feedback commentary was all about brainstorming. How can somebody take the stuff that their brain has managed to manufacture somehow and make more out of it by interacting with other brains? Well, maybe GenAI is what I mean, I am interacting with other brains because the reason LLMs do so well is because, I don't know how you know the Turing test?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I, among the countless stupid things that I've said in the past, said the Turing test will never be passed by a purely computational word bot. And it has been. But it has been by cheating. And the way it cheats is by swallowing everything we say. It is basically, these are all borrowed words in context and very powerful algorithms and statistics that allow it to interact with you as if it understood what you were saying, and it's sharing with you what it knows. It doesn't know anything. It's just swallowed at this big gulp, and it knows how to navigate through it. But it produces a miracle, an absolute amazing result. My heart is with saving animals. I'm continuing to work because I want to keep on saving money that I can leave to animals. But my brain is with this stuff because this is where the brains are.
I'm with you. I keep having to tell myself I can ask one of these tools to say what's the best book on X, and it'll tell me. And I have to remind myself that it hasn't read any of them. it's just passing on what other people have said.
And if it did, it wouldn't understand it. If it did, it wouldn't understand it. All it does is it does statistics on these pattern completions that it does on the side, and obey the worst, but not entirely demonic, injunction from the managers that you must please the customer. You must agree. You must make them feel better about themselves. So even if you don't know, and even if you hadn't read anything on it, that's where they're not hallucinations, they're confabulations, is what they are.
But you're using it. So do you think there's an element? You've lived through the sort of the rise of the internet, and of course the internet is something that and things like Google we derided, but we all make use of. Do you think the same thing is going to happen with GenAI?
It's happening, of course. I mean, is that a question? Are there any doubts?
So
and what is going to? Did you say is going to happen? It is happening.
Yeah.
Everybody's student and everybody's colleague is using it, feeling quite guilty. The fact, for example, should I be feeling guilty that the thesis that we're evaluating this afternoon, which I've read and I know in fact I know the content's black, but I also had it read by GenAI, and then I brainstormed with GenAI, and I got more ideas about what to say and not to say, and what's true and not true about this thing, even though GenAI doesn't understand a thing, not a thing.
So that suggests that there is such a thing as AI literacy.
What do you mean by that?
Well, an awareness of how to make sensible use. I mean, things like giving it effective prompts. You get good results if you ask it the right questions. If you ask Google what the meaning of life is, you're not going to get a very sensible answer. But if you ask Google where the nearest pizzeria is, you'll get a very precise answer. So it's learning what these tools can and can't do.
Well, but if it is not pizza versus the meaning of life, my entire intellectual life was based on a certain kind of interaction with other ideas, written and spoken, and other people. We're still doing the same thing with GenAI, except it's not a person. It's the products of countless persons, everything. I mean, I can no longer find. I speak quite a few languages, and I deliberately, just for fun, during an interaction with say ChatGPT, I'll switch to Hungarian, and then I'll switch to French, and then I'll switch to German, and it doesn't miss a beat. and I can, so that's just languages, but I can do it by topic as well.
This is quite incredible. It goes right back to your interest as a scientist, in that your work right back in the time of your PhD about sort of symbols and how understanding or manipulating symbols isn't the same as reality. That seems uncannily to echo exactly what GenAI is doing.
What is true for some, look, talk about citation impact factor. My most cited article is the 1990 article on the symbol grounding problem. And I can't bear to read the articles that cite it because they get it so wrong. It's a source of misery to me. What was I going to say with that? So yes, so in that original article, what I was pointing to was that the reason the Turing test will never be passed by a computational device like ChatGPT, is that you cannot, it still holds true. It's because they can't understand anything. How can you understand everything or anything in words if all you have is words. Words are just words. Well, yes, words are just words, but what's encoded in these words, which are also arbitrary shapes, right? I mean, the word cat doesn't look like a cat or sound like a cat. It's just an arbitrary symbol. And 3 doesn't sound like 3 or whatever. In all of these arbitrary words, in all these languages that ChatGPT can switch between without any trouble, there is something that language itself is preserving across people and across heads and minds. And of course, it's not enough. If you are a human being, if all you ever get from birth is oral interaction with ChatGPT, no pictures, no nothing, you end up completely mentally debilitated. Nothing. You can't speak. Nothing. So words themselves can't be it. But having become normal humans as we have, from a child through development, through interaction with the world, through seeing, tasting, touching, learning language, etc., we have built up an understanding, a real understanding of those words. We understand the words. The chatbot, the GenAI or whatever you call it, doesn't understand a thing, but because it gets these gifts from us, it can give us back. I call it. Well, what if? Okay, I don't want to focus it on this, but you brought it up. The symbol grounding problem is how to connect words to what it is that they mean. And that's something that chatbots cannot do, because all they have is words. They can only connect words to words. A dictionary can only do that as well. If you look up a word, let's say Chinese. I don't speak Chinese. I really don't. So but let's say there was a phonetic Chinese dictionary where I could look up ban ma, and I could see the words that define ban ma and its other words that I don't understand. How can I ever get from that to what ban ma means? And what has happened is, in the beginning, that was the idea. But then a big interval went by when regular AI, not Gen AI, what you were talking about, just regular AI, what's called good old-fashioned AI, was making a lot of progress. And that was literally what John Hauglin called it, GoFi, good old-fashioned AI. Now it's Gen AI. What it was doing in that time was I lost the thread. I'm always guilty of opening too many parentheses. Let me take a step back, because there was something. Oh yes, okay, right. Now I remember. With all of this enormous, the great, la grande gorgée, the great gulp, the big gulp. That's it. What the Gen AIs have swallowed with the big gulp is all of this word salad, which to them means nothing, but in a strange way contains a lot of structure from us. I mean, we say this next word rule is not arbitrary. We say a lot of things, but we don't often say certain words after the other. You don't often say cat persimmon or cat hadron, right? So there's structure in that stuff, but it's just statistical structure. And with the right computation, you can use that structure not to make ChatGPT understand. It cannot make a connection between things that it has no access to, but you have access to it. So there is a way to ground symbols by you're not going to expect the word that I'm going to say now, but it's actually robotics that's going to do it, because robots can do what we can do. Robots can go out in the world, I'm not saying see because they're not conscious, so they can optically process stuff.
Observe.
You have to go?
No, carry on.
They have to tactually process things. The way to ground symbols is not through the Turing test T2, which is basically a chatbot with words, but a robot that is also learning words, but that is also learning the stuff that the words stand for, and connecting them. And what has happened across these years is that 1990 article, which is still being cited so much, and I'm still horrified by its citing, has now taken another twist. It's like symbol grounding 2. They're saying, aha, so these amazing things that the chatbots can do, they can do it. Harnad was even wrong that they couldn't pass the Turing test, but he insists, and maybe he's right, that they're cheating by using our words, because we have the connection with the objects, not the GPT. So whereas we can directly ground our words, we can learn what's what, learn the features to recognize sensory motor features for what's what. A cat is this furry little creature with the ears, etc. What we can do is, what the chatbot can do, what the chat GPT can do, is it can give us the words that it has, that is not understood, but that is made into something understandable to us. We have directly grounded the symbols. So we know what these are. In the dictionary, for example, there's a certain number of words in Chinese. If I know them, then with the rest I can do indirectly by simply using the words that I know to define the words that I don't yet know. That's the way to ground symbols, and it leads to another way of learning, and that's the brainwashing that I'm doing now. I'm not reading journals. So, I mean, I read them. I have to, but I'm consulting LLMs for what it is that they, without understanding, put together that I didn't know because I hadn't read that stuff, and then let me take it from there.
Something of a paradox that you made up. You spent a long time justifying very eloquently the linking of words with meaning and words with objects, and yet in the opening of your the first issue of your journal, Animal Sentience, you said the fundamental distinction between about humans is that humans can use words and animals have no words. Seems like words, even words, are not enough.
It's an interesting parallel, but it's not quite what you say. Animals don't have words, but they do have cognition, and they are incredibly smart. In fact, so smart that some of my questions have been, why is it that chimpanzees, for example, or even dogs, but chimpanzees are not, I don't care if they do it in English or they do it in sign language or they do it with computer things, why are we not communicating with them verbally? And they really, really can't, which doesn't mean that there's tons of stuff that they, what shall I say as an example? You could have, no, it's too big a topic. I think I'm being too adventurous with this.
Well, I think it's fascinating that that perhaps we haven't got time to go on to sort of your work with the animals and feelings, but it's been fascinating talking with you about your work on open access and how it's linked in and I think we all owe you a vote of thanks for the incredible campaigning that you carried out over many years for open access, and even if it's not completely a one victory, I think there will be a lot less of it if you hadn't been
how English to say not completely a one victory when it was really a total failure.
Well, many thanks anyway for your time, Stevan.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.